you actually do good things. We can't
Well,
say that about a whole lot of elected officials. But fortunately, New Yorkers are able to choose between folks like yourself and some of the other candidates that we've already had on this show. We've got a couple others
mm.
who are coming on this week. Talk to us about your vision for New York City, particularly as we are really coming to grips with the very significant role that mayors of cities like New York, like Los Angeles, really play, especially when the president of this country seems to have the city in his crosshairs.
Yeah. Let me tell you about what I did last Thursday, because I think it's a good place to start. After I saw what happened with Dylan Contreras, this New York City public high school student who ICE tricked into basically giving up his asylum application and then grabbed him and deported him. And then I saw that some New York City religious leaders and court watchers got arrested, and that not just ICE, but NYPD were involved. I thought I better get down there. So my team reached out to this organization, Immigrant Arc, that does the court watching. And last Thursday, I went to 290 Broadway, one of the federal buildings where these hearings are taking place. And I go upstairs. And even before I get into the courtroom the first time, they say, hey, controller, this 25-year-old dad, Camilo, with the little boy, Brian, 2 years old, who's like scampering around, and I'm kind of chasing him around the room. They just had that happen to them. They were stripped of their, the deportation proceeding was dropped, so they're stripped of their asylum application, and now they're subject to expedited removal. He will
Wow.
probably be picked up on the way out of the building. Will you accompany him from, the court hearing, basically down through the elevator, through the lobby, see if he
Mm.
can get out of the building? And, so I say, I mean, sure, if that's what you need me to do. And so we get in the elevator and he's shaking and I'm shaking. I mean, we just
Mm.
expect there's ice, you could see ICE agents around. And lo and behold, we're able to get in the elevator and go downstairs and walk through the lobby and get out the door. And then we just like, oh my God, and I walked him to the subway and, he was able to get on the subway. And, obviously he's still got these risks. And I did that twice more for a couple and then for a family, parents of New York City school kids
Okay.
who were afraid they might not get back to their kids. And those apparently the only three folks that have gotten out of that building over the last week in this way. And I
Wow.
don't know whether that's just like, luck from above, whether that's because, they were with the controller, or whether that's because, 'cause the controller job comes with an NYPD detail. So I did have an NYPD officer with me in the elevator and walking through the building. And if what I was able to do with a little bit of my privilege was bring the NYPD to the side of a couple of undocumented asylum seekers so they could have some more safety in this city. What a blessing to do that. And to me, like in some ways, that's what I'm running for, as mayor to do, is show that the city's going to stand up for New York values. And I'm going to bring our resources there myself, the NYPD that work for me. And, that family that's got school kids, that got me thinking, if we had made sure that their school social worker or parent coordinator had
Mm.
said to them, hey, there's legal resources for you. Let me connect you to Action NYC or the Immigrant Opportunity Initiative. They
Right.
could have had a lawyer before they ever came to that hearing. So this city can do better on delivering on affordable housing and public safety and and it can also show in a time of Trump what it looks like to put our resources on the side of our values, what it means to have that statue out there in the harbor, that
Mm.
there's a choice between immigrant New Yorkers and native born New Yorkers, that we stand up together. And what that takes is a safer, more affordable, better run city, honest leadership, someone who will stand up to Trump, someone with the progressive values New Yorkers share, and also the management chops and the
Right.
experience to govern the city better, to deliver on those progressive values. And that's what I'm waking up every day to do, and why I'm running for mayor.
The story that you just shared, it reminds me of the role of the comptroller. And one of the things that you all do is think about, okay, if there are these sets of problems and there are these sets of resources, what is the best way to spend the city's resources to address those problems? Your office has put out a number of reports that look at creative ways. One, you describe the problems that New Yorkers are experiencing on a regular basis, and you have really creative ways where your office this is basically thinking about what you have. One report, for example, Stranded After School, looking at the service programs and the capacity for after school programs to sort of fill in the gap and the inequities that are there. It's called Stranded After School, Advancing Equity and Transportation Access for Students with Disabilities. And you all have put out a number of reports that really think critically about not just describing the problems, but thinking even more critically about how to use the resources to resolve them. That seems at times to be a lost art when it comes to the mayoralty. Talk to us about some of the recent decisions that have been made. You are, as well as I'm, that we had a massive budget cuts to everything from childhood education programs, after school programs, libraries, a whole host of issues. We mentioned in the intro that you were able to reject a no bid contract that was going to divert almost $500 million in New York City funds in a way that was not quite on the up and up. Talk to us about the role of the mayor, not only as an enforcer and the executor of the city's, sitting in the executive position, but also as the mayor as a problem solver, because that seems to be where some of your stronger points come from. This ability to see an issue, think about the resources, and bring them together.
Yeah, thank you. That really is a great description of the job of controller. Like you look in on what the problems are and develop solutions. And, maybe I'll take two places we've done that and what it would look like to deliver as mayor. So you mentioned this stranded after school report we just did. No one had surveyed, everyone is saying we need universal after school. And I give Zeldor Myrie credit for leading on that in this mayor's race. And he's really brought us all along. I've joked that New Yorkers United for Childcare have pretty much already won the mayor's race because all the candidates are supporting an expansion of childcare to 3 and 2-year-olds and more after school programs. So that is great. And we need it. No one had surveyed what's going on in our schools right now, because a lot of schools have an after school program, but maybe it's just a little money that comes from a settlement house nearby, or there's some fee-based programs where parents who can pay, and you're not really supposed to have that in the schools, but it's better than nothing. So who gets in and what scholarships are there? We took a look and we found a lot of critical gaps, and it's not a surprise, but one of the critical gaps is that students with special needs, with physical disabilities, with IEPs are really not served in those programs. And in many cases, they need them the most, right? If you've got somebody who's got a learning disability or he needs extra help reading, what would be better than trying to make it fun, let them do some sports, and then also connect that to education? But we're really failing on that. And we laid out some real detailed ways. Here's what after school programs would look like that were truly universal and also that make sure that kids with special needs get served. So that's the kind of thing as mayor. Like, I'm not just going to expand after school programs. I'm going to dig in and make sure they get to the kids who need them most in a real educational way. One other report that's one of my favorite that we've done, and I think points to how you can do mayoral problem solving on big issues. We did the first report ever on the racial wealth gap
I
in
was just gonna go to that. See, I thought we'd start with this. Okay, yes, let's go right into it. Let's talk about
I
that
think of
report.
it as the same. It's like on the one hand, I mean, I'm inspired by the values idea. I think, and I have on my bookshelf here, I think both Heather McGhee's book, The Sum of Us, like that, and that sort of idea that, she talks about how the racial wealth gap has drained our democracy and how if we get it right, we could have a solidarity, what she calls a solidarity dividend. I love that thinking. The comptroller's way of looking at it is let's just dig in and give you the numbers. So the median household net worth of a white family in New York, we found, is $277,000. That's mostly in home value. But that's enough to help give your kids some money for a down payment or pay for college or save for retirement. That is 15 times the median net worth of a Black New York household, which is just under $18,000, which is enough to do none of those things, not even weather a health crisis, much less send your kid to college, help them buy a home, or save for retirement. And like that's appalling. And when you know the numbers and dig in and look and see that it plays through everything, it plays through home purchase and home value and financial savings and education. And then you think, okay, all right, so that's a really strong indictment of where we are, but
Mhm.
let's get practical. What could you do about it?
Right.
So I think there's only two candidates in the race, Zelnor and I, who have specific plans, like what would it look like to do better by Black New Yorkers. And, homeownership is one of the great examples. We should and could have a set of programs that would make homeownership more possible for working
Mm.
class New Yorkers. And there's no reason not to measure that by race and who's getting opportunities. And if white New Yorkers are twice as likely to be homeowners and their homes are about twice as valuable, it's totally appropriate for New York City to say, in my Homes for City Workers program, in the new co-ops that we're going to build on
Wow.
4 of the city's 12 city-owned golf courses, we're going to work hard to make there be access for people who have not had it, and measure and show, are we closing the racial wealth gap in access to MWBE contracts in homeownership? And I've done that as controller. The biggest asset as controller I have is the management of the pension funds,
Mm.
the $275 billion that is the
Yep.
retirement security of teachers and firefighters and school crossing guards. And we've increased the amount being managed by Black and Latino and MWBE managers by $6 billion, by nearly
Wow.
40% in my tenure. And that kind of like practical, but also values-driven problem solving is what a mayor can do in so many places in our housing policy, in small business and contracting, in economic development.
Mm.
We have not been getting that, and that's what I'm going to deliver.
Yeah, it's interesting because what you just said sound makes logical sense to me. If we have a racial wealth gap that can be attributed to a host of things, namely racism, we can look at that in very practical ways in addition to the theories that underline it, then it makes sense in my mind to have solutions that are going to factor that in so that the gap is able to actually close and so people are able to actually do some of the things throughout all of our communities as opposed to wondering whether or not you're going to be able to send your child to school. Will you be able to retire and send your child to school at the same time while also having access to healthcare? And yet we're in a time right now, comptroller, where and I'm speaking again with Brad Lander, candidate for New York City mayor. We're in a time right now where having conversations about racial disparities, having conversations that seek to remedy racial disparities are in and of themselves being considered or reclassified as inherently racist. So how do you, as somebody who shows up in a body, and for the audience, if you do not know what Brad Lander looks like, he presents as somebody who is a white man. Brad Lander, I'm assuming that's how you identify, although recently I was in a room with someone I assumed was a white woman, and she was like, I'm not white. And she had a lengthy history of blackness in her family. I was like, you are correct. Thank you for that. So having that conversation about racial disparities and then having a solution that contemplates alleviating those disparities is right now a very difficult conversation for a
Yeah.
lot of folks in this country to have. Talk to us about how you're able to see a path forward where that conversation not only can happen, but actually should be what's happening.
Yeah, a few thoughts here. First, I mentioned what Heather McGee calls the solidarity dividend. For us in the pension fund management, it's not just that it's the right thing to do. Those are many of the best asset managers. And if in money management, there's this word diversification, which is about diversifying everything except the people who manage your money. You put it in different size of businesses and different business sectors and different asset class and different continents. And that's very prudent, diversifying your portfolio. And then if you say, well, how come 98.98% of the asset managers are white men? You'd be like, whoa, 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 now what are you talking about? But of course, talent is spread throughout the people. And our Black asset managers are some of the best ones and overperformed their benchmarks by 5% last year. We tracked this as well. So diversifying our asset managers is not just good for MWBE investors, it's good for taxpayers. It really does grow the pie for everyone. It's important to tell that story. One of the people who's really good at this is Jumaane Williams, and he's done this well on asylum seekers when this is more like he's speaking to Black New Yorkers about why not to believe Eric Adams when he scapegoats asylum seekers, and is able to say, look, yes, government has been failing you on housing affordability and safety in your neighborhoods and investment in your communities, but it's not those folks' fault. And we have to deliver better. And I just think that's true in all directions. I'm gonna end street homelessness for people with serious mental illness when I'm mayor. People start wanting, in many cases, I guess maybe more wealthier, whiter folks, often start wanting a more punitive solution. It's kind of like just get those folks off the subway, and if you got to take them to a hospital or even jail, that'll make the city safer. And sometimes I can say, hey, okay, I hear that you're afraid on the subway, but let's say that person goes to hospital. When they come back out, aren't they just going to come right back to this train? And if we wanted to solve this problem, wouldn't we need to connect them to housing and services? And you can
Right.
actually walk a lot of people into seeing the ways in which confronting inequities is critical to building a better city. And it'd be nice if people would all do it because they were grounded in like a vision of equal justice, but helping show people what a New York City can look like. This New York City can only be safe and thriving if there is real access to opportunity across communities. And I think we can make that case. Donald Trump might succeed nationally, but mostly in New York City. If you want to live here, you got your eyes open to what a diverse place it is, and
Mm.
we have to do better by it. And I'll just say one last thing, as I am white and also Jewish, and this has really been important for me in this mayor's race because I love what New York City has been for Jews after 2,000 years of getting the crap kicked out of us around the world. This city has given us an incredible place of opportunity and safety. And that brings a pay it forward obligation. It is our responsibility as Jewish New Yorkers, of course, to call out anti-Semitism and work to keep ourselves safe, but also to see that others need equal opportunity and that we are on the side of civil rights and on the side of due process and democracy. And so when I see people trying to weaponize anti-Semitism against civil rights, like honestly, all of Donald Trump, Eric Adams, and Andrew Cuomo are doing, I get loud about it because it will not make Jews or anybody else safer to play on our fears and undermine the Civil Rights Coalition, undermine the basic idea of inclusive, diverse, multiracial democracy that this city is built on. And we got a lot of work to do to persuade people of that and then show people we can actually deliver it.
Mm. And we're going to have an opportunity for those conversations to really kick up in earnest. As I'm sure you are aware, there are a number of protests planned for this weekend. We saw some even yesterday. I later this evening will be in Harlem for the next of the reparations hearings. New York City is one of the places where we are really grappling with some of these social justice issues and discussions in some really challenging ways. And you'd mentioned housing for those who are navigating housing insecurity and mental illness. Let's also talk about housing for everyday New Yorkers, people who are right now looking at their bank accounts, looking at what's happening with international trade, and whether they know what it's called or not, they are clear that things cost a whole lot more money, including the ability to engage in affordable housing. Talk to us about your plan for housing for New York City. And one of the things I am very aware of is that gentrification has been a huge issue for New Yorkers, particularly New Yorkers in neighborhoods that I represent at the Center for Law and Social Justice and the neighborhood I live in. So talk to us about what your plan for housing looks like, particularly because we're in a time right now where there's a growing chorus of concern about the fact that we are losing communities of color by the thousands, and they are being replaced with people who do not necessarily, regardless of their race, have the culture, the flavor, the sense of New York City. Talk to us about what housing looks like under Mayor Bradlander.
Great. Let me tell you a little about my history first, because for 15 years before I got into city government, I worked in affordable housing, tenants' rights, anti-gentrification, and community development. I ran the Fifth Avenue Committee, and that was an amazing education. That was more in the time when homes were being abandoned and people were
Mm.
struggling to bring their neighborhoods back from the brink. And on one block, the block of St. John's, between 5th and 6th in my neighborhood, HUD came and told 102 Black and Puerto Rican families, your landlord defaulted on the loan to HUD. You guys have 90 days to get out. And they said, hey, we're not going anywhere. This one mother of four, Ibon Mohammed, she like led the effort. And they said, not only are you not kicking us out, you're going to sell these buildings to us. And they fought hard enough, and lo and behold, HUD did. And 40 years later, 102 Black and Puerto Rican families still own that block
Wow.
as a limited equity cooperative. And that is what inspired me to a career fighting for just that model, like keeping people in their homes, whether as tenants or owners, investing in bringing neighborhoods back in ways that protect the people that have been there a long time. And,
Hmm.
I led the effort to redevelop the area around the Gowanus Canal, where 8,000 new homes are rising, 3,000 genuinely affordable to low income and working class families. We did a racial impact study, the first ever on a rezoning, that said actually this is going to make the neighborhood more diverse because it's gotten too expensive for Black and Latino families. But those 3,000 units will probably mostly be Black and Latino families. But more important than that was that the 1,500 public housing residents nearby said, hey, we don't object to this rezoning and building new housing, but you better fix our homes and make it, sure that we're not going to get demolished, they're not going to get demolished. And so we won a $200 million commitment, and every one of those 1,500 units is being renovated and it's staying traditional public housing.
Wow.
And so that's my model. Like, we need to build more housing, and I've got plans for 500,000 new homes, including 50,000 on four of the city's 12 city-owned golf courses. That was even before I saw, like Eric Adams, top lieutenants, and Donald Trump make a deal on the golf course yesterday. I'm not anti-golf. I just think 8 golf courses is enough for New York City to own, and we could build 50,000 homes on the other four. And
Wow.
that can be a new Mitchell Lama-like program with pathways to homeownership, like we did at Co-op City and Penn South and Amalgamated Houses.
Huh.
At the same time, we have to fight to enable people to stay in the neighborhoods that they love. And that means delivering on the right to counsel that we promised tenants in housing court, but Eric Adams has dismally failed to deliver, letting people know about their rights under what's called good cause eviction, which can help the half of tenants who aren't rent stabilized, and restoring the pathway to homeownership.